Today, March 4th, 2025, we are receiving, from what I can see here, the 5th re-release of GTA 5. I recently upgraded my computer, and I think I can show you the main differences that are now, like from the old version to the new version, and a comparison already with the Play 5 version. Because in theory, now it's the Play 5 version that has arrived for the computer, but on the computer we have many more options. So I set all the settings here to the maximum, everything on Ultra, the maximum that I found here in terms of options, set it up and started it running, and then I'll show you the differences side by side, old version, Play 5 version, and the new version, which is the expanded and improved computer version, okay? Let's go. Starting here on the loading screen, in the old computer version of GTA 5, now known as Legacy, we used to have this swipe to the side on the character wallpapers. In the new version, it's exactly like Play 5. Instead of swiping to the side with the background image cropped, we now have exactly like the whole screen filled with a more static thing, you know? Both on Play 5 and on PC, this setup remained the same. Remember that now we can have both versions of GTA 5, okay? It's not any kind of differential, right? It's just a matter of like detailing. I'll try to bring as much as possible, follow the same line of thought that I did in the Play 4 versus Play 5 video. Got it? Now, talking about the menus, the GTA 5 from the old generation, like from the computer, right? The GTA 5 Legacy, I'm going to call it GTA 5 Legacy, it already had a menu, different from the Play 4 version. This menu now, in the expanded and improved version, is exactly the same as the Play 5 version, exactly the same as the Play 5 menu. So you have there the GTA Plus, the story mode, and the online mode for you to access separately. You could already access separately in the old version in GTA Legacy, but you didn't have access to GTA Plus. I will be making graphic comparisons in this video using the fidelity mode of the Play 5, which runs at 30 frames per second. Here on the computer, I set everything to the maximum. I thought it looked really good, and I was able to run most of the time at 60 frames per second. So I think you guys will really enjoy it. Look at how it is that there was the old PC version. This here is the new PC version, just so you guys have an idea of more or less how this thing is turning out, how the graphics turned out more or less. And this here is the Play 5 version, okay, with everything activated there at maximum with HDR, 4K, and all the bells and whistles. Remembering that the computer version, I am also recording in 4K to try to make the best possible comparison there between the Play 5 version and the new computer version. The old version I also recorded in 4K, but the difference is minimal, okay? I will be honest in saying that it is minimal, alright? Vehicle densities, I think there was a difference, but like, dude, very little, because on the computer that was already configurable. From Play 4 to Play 5, we had a slightly bigger advancement than we had now from GTA 5 Legacy to the expanded and enhanced version. Because since we could already adjust this issue of population density, it doesn't make much difference. I used to leave it at maximum before, which was the video I had shown you from the old version. And now I also set it to maximum, so for me it stayed exactly the same. And on Play 5, I feel like there's still a little more than the two computer versions, but it could just be an impression. I can't be sure because I'm not counting the cars passing by, but I have a slight impression that the Play 5 version has a little more cars than the PC version, even with settings at maximum. But as I said, it could just be an impression. About the density of NPCs, I'm not sure if I'm completely right, but I had the impression that the NPC density had a really good improvement in the expanded and enhanced version. Like when there were NPCs on the beach before, with the new version there was a difference. And in the Play 5 version, I think there was an advancement, but not as significant. So I think in this part, the expanded and enhanced version of GTA 5 ended up surpassing a bit. But as I said, it might just be perception. In the Play 5 version of GTA 5, there are already more NPCs than in the Legacy version, okay? This detail is important. However, I found that in the expanded and enhanced computer version, if you put everything on maximum, you can still have a little more NPCs than in Play 5, alright? I think now it's better explained what I wanted to say because it ends up being a bit confusing. Too much information. Now moving on to a test that for me made a big difference in the PS5 version, okay? It's the explosions. In the old computer version, we had an explosion there very similar to the one on the PS4, which had less smoke and less fire. Now in the expanded and improved version, we have something almost identical to the PS5. The fire itself, it's denser. The smoke is stronger. There are more particles and such, just like what we have here in the PlayStation 5 version. You can see more fire and more particles. However, in the computer version with everything maxed out, everything enhanced, I found that it looked less cartoonish and a little more realistic. I don't know if you guys can notice in the video, but for me, I had the impression that it looked a little better. I don't know if you can see it clearly. But in the old version, there was very little fire and very little smoke. It was exactly the same as the Play 4 version. Even if you left the old version, which is the Legacy, on Ultra, here I am testing on Ultra. In the new version, you can see that on Ultra, the fire, it already looks very nice. It's well designed there, at least from my point of view. And the smoke, it's much stronger, but it's not as exaggerated as, I don't know, on Play 5. On Play 5, I thought it was very strong. It looks much more like a cartoon, especially the smoke. I prefer it over the legacy version, obviously, but I found that in the expanded and improved computer version, that part there was less forced, let's say. It was good, well done, enhanced, but it was less forced than it was in the PlayStation 5 version. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but comment below. And the same thing doesn't just apply to explosions. Like, if you put a gasoline trail on the ground and shoot at that gasoline trail, you'll be able to see the difference there, like in all versions. Like in the legacy version, you see that it was very little indeed, very little visible. In the new version, you see that there's already something very similar there to what we had in the Play 5 version. I also had the impression that the little gasoline comes out a little darker, when you throw it on the ground. But it could just be an impression as well, of course. And the fire gets stronger, the smoke gets stronger. All of this from the expanded and improved version really ends up making a little improvement. Not that it's something worth paying for again on the Play 5, but for the computer version it came out for free, so it's definitely great. The same thing should have happened on the Play 5. But anyway, just for you to see a side-by-side comparison there of how the comparison looks like playing with fire there and shooting, so you can see the difference from your point of view and, I don't know, not rely so much on my opinion. Got it? And the same thing applies to the car, like the gas station. If you have an explosion, it used to be much weaker in the explosion there in GTA 5 Legacy, which is the same version for Play 4. But in the expanded and improved version, I thought it really got better in the Play 5 and computer version. But I thought the computer one was a little better because of that issue with the fire that I thought became more realistic and a little less forced. Like, I also found the smoke to be too forced in the Play 5 version. As I mentioned before, on the PS5, it's even better than the Play 4 version and GTA 5 Legacy. But still, I think the guys managed to just tone down that part that I thought was too forced, and it ended up maybe being in the ideal balance now, alright? Here was also an improvement in the smoke part in the game, mainly like that tire smoke and stuff. In the legacy version of GTA 5, we had some cool smoke. It was much better than the Play 4 version. At least from my point of view, that part was already well improved. In the expanded and enhanced version, we have something a little better than the PlayStation 5 version, because just like I found the fire smoke to be very forced, the Play 5 smoke also seemed a little forced. However, in the computer version, I thought it was reduced. So this one was from Play 5, the computer one was the one I showed just now, and then I'm gonna put the three side by side for you to see. But if you look, the Play 5 one is like very strong smoke, see? Like very white. And if you compare it to the expanded and enhanced computer one, you can see that they reduced it a little to maybe make it a little more realistic. I think maybe there's the perfect balance, as I mentioned before. But as I said, it's my point of view. There may be people out there who will like the Play 5 version or the legacy version much more. Alright guys, taste is taste. I don't discuss that part. Looking now at the distance detailing, like how much we can see in terms of details at a certain distance. In the legacy version of GTA 5 itself, running on Ultra, I couldn't see many things in the distance, especially shadows and such. But in the new version of GTA 5, you can see like shadows from far away. Like even from those trees that are way back there, you can see shadows on them, like lighting and all. Like this part here, the ray tracing came to be really cool. And on the Play 5, we already had that, but I thought the detailing still looked better in the computer version, because I think on the computer you can play with more power and then it's better. If you look at the Play 5 version versus the expanded and enhanced version, you'll see that there are some trees depending on the distance that are kind of jagged, This also happens in the computer version, just much less. So it kind of ends up being better on the computer version, but you need to have a great graphics card. If you start zooming in, for example, here in the legacy version, it gets kind of weird because as you zoom in, the shadow disappears, the detailing should increase, but it kind of doesn't, it gets a bit messed up. And remember, okay, here I'm running on the legacy version at maximum settings. In the new version, you can already see much better. And the color scheme also improved, I think, I don't know, due to HDR and these things, but you need a compatible graphics card. But the color scheme and detailing improved a lot. More vegetation was also added in my opinion, and it looked even better than this Play 5 version. Because on the Play 5 that you guys are seeing there, I thought the detailing of the expanded and enhanced computer version, due to being able to use more hardware to make this run perfectly, you can have a much more significant difference. Actually not much more, just a little more significant there, the computer version than the Play 5 version. Even the computer running on Ultra with everything, okay? Now in this shadow part here, I thought the Play 5 one was even better. If you look here in the legacy version, we already had vehicle shadows cast by headlights. When you played on Ultra, you could already see that. It was something we didn't have on the PS4, but in the legacy version, playing with shadows on Ultra, the vehicle headlights already cast shadows on objects and scenarios. In the new expanded and improved computer version, we also have the same effect that we already had in the legacy version. You set shadows to Ultra and so on. It looks really good as well. I thought it improved there compared to the legacy version, but I liked it much more in the PS5 version because I found it more noticeable, more visible. To me, it seemed like the shadow was darker, Now, I don't know if you guys can perceive it, but it seems to me that the shadow generated on objects is much darker on the PS5 than on the computer version. However, in this part here, when you stop to see other vehicles, I thought that the computer one looked a little better. It might just be an impression, or I don't know, but overall, really overall, I thought that the shadows on the PS5, when they are shadows made by the vehicle headlights and so on, they look better on the PS5, okay? The expanded and improved version looks better on the PS5 than like in the new computer version and in the old computer version as well. Even if you play with shadows on Ultra, maximum detail and so on, because I thought that on the PS5 these shadows are darker. However, on the computer, the only difference I noticed is that you kind of have two shadows, one stronger and one lighter on the side, which looks more realistic as if it were the two headlights illuminating the object. So when you illuminate the vehicle or another item, even though the shadow is not as dark as on the PS5, I think there is more detail. Something you didn't have in the PS5 version. You generate a shadow when you illuminate objects. Now, looking at the vegetation from above, we can see that the legacy version was quite sparse. Even if you play everything on Ultra, there's very little of it. I felt that this improved in the expanded and enhanced computer version compared to the Play 5 version, because there was the legacy in 2015, the expanded and enhanced Play 5 version came out in March 2022, which already had more vegetation. However, this new computer version, when you play everything at maximum, you get a little more than what you would have on Play 5. A little more detailing, a little more trees, grass, a little more bushes, but it's not like, wow, if you're sacrificing a lot of performance to run it and it doesn't make much difference. Now, if you have a graphics card that can handle it smoothly, you'll notice that there's a bit of a difference. There's a bit more than what you would have playing on the Play 5 version, which is cool. If you have the power, let it run everything at maximum. I wish that this computer version would come with the amount of trees and vegetation shown in GTA 5 Trailer 1, but we already know that's kind of impossible. Another cool difference we had here was in the glass animation, because when we shot at the GTA Legacy, the glass would fly off in small pieces, very small pieces and such. It was very identical there practically to the Play 4 version, right? And okay, when the new version came out now, we see that it basically uses the same animation that we have in the expanded and improved Play 5, which ends up with larger glass pieces coming off. And these glass pieces fall to the ground and take a little while to disappear, you know? In Play 5 this also happens, but I found that it disappears faster on Play 5 than on PC. When you shoot, some big chunks of glass come off. They fall on the ground. If you're not having trouble seeing, I don't know, zoom in there, look on the ground and such, and then you'll notice that there's a quite noticeable difference in this animation. I found that the expanded and improved version of GTA 5 on Ultra PC looked a little better than the PS5 because the glass became a little more visible when it falls to the ground. So I think there's a slight improvement in reflections and so on. So, talking about reflections, let's move on to ray tracing and so on. In the legacy version of GTA 5, it already looked really good when you put it on Ultra. I'm running this without any graphic mods just to make it clear, okay? So it already looked really good when you ran it on Ultra compared to the PlayStation 4. But in the expanded and improved version, we're much more advanced. I thought it looked much prettier, much more illuminated in terms of lighting and so on, because we basically have the fidelity mode of the PlayStation 5, but now, depending on your graphics card, at 60 frames per second as well. So on the PS5 it looks like this. The fidelity mode looks really good on the PS5. The only problem is that it's at 30 frames per second, man. It's a bummer. Seriously, it really is a bummer. I like 60 FPS. I think it's really cool. I don't need to go above 60 frames per second, but I think 60 frames per second is the minimum to look nice and smooth. And when you take the PS5 version running on the computer at basically 60 frames per second, I think it's kind of the best of both worlds, because then it looks nice. You can really notice the difference, real difference between the old version. Even in the lighting on Franklin, for example, you can see how the lighting affects him and how that makes a difference. Looking at the legacy version here, in the old version we didn't have ray tracing, even on Ultra, okay? You can see that Franklin there is not being mirrored. In the new version he can be mirrored here, okay? And on the Play 5 he was already mirrored only in fidelity mode. In performance mode with ray tracing it didn't work. And in fidelity mode, as I already told you, we dropped to 30 frames per second. So on the computer we can have ray tracing at 60 frames per second. There's a difference, sometimes barely noticeable, but I thought ray tracing on the computer also got a little better. The reflection on vehicles and such, I thought there isn't as much in the PlayStation 5 version, and there's a little more, like a little bit more in the computer version, but as I said, it's a matter of hardware. Maybe the Play 5 doesn't even support as much. There were some parts that I thought were weaker on the computer, like this one I showed, like now on the computer it's weaker and on the Play 5 it's better. Moving on to interaction with elements, in the old version we had very little. Like if you shoot at the grass here in the legacy version, even on Ultra, very little grass will come out, right? And in the new version the difference here became quite absurd. Just look at how many shots I took, there's no grass left up there. And now in the new version, man, the amount that accumulates, like a lot of grass is piling up there. Each blade of grass has its own shadow due to ray tracing and all. This was already on the PS5, so I thought it improved a little more just on the computer version because there are more particles, let's say. But it already existed on the PS5. The only difference I mentioned is that, like, on the computer it's running at 60 frames per second, and on the PS5 it will be running all this at 30 because of the fidelity mode. Although, if I'm not mistaken, this part looks good even in performance mode with ray tracing. In the PS5 version, only the reflections don't look very good in performance mode with ray tracing. Moving on to interaction with elements, in the old version we had very little. Like, if you shoot at the grass here in the legacy version, even on ultra, very little grass will come out, right? And in the new version, the difference here became quite absurd. Just look at how many shots I took, there's no grass left up there. And now in the new version, man, the amount that accumulates, like a lot of grass is piling up there. Each blade of grass has its own shadow due to ray tracing and all. This was already on the PS5, so I thought it improved a little more just on the computer version because there are more particles, let's say. But it already existed on the PS5. The only difference I mentioned is that, like, on the computer it's running at 60 frames per second, and on the PS5 it will be running all this at 30 because of the fidelity mode. Although, if I'm not mistaken, this part looks good even in performance mode with ray tracing. In the PS5 version, only the reflections don't look very good in performance mode with ray tracing. Now moving on to the interaction of elements with the scenario. If you pick up and start throwing leaves at the wall, in the legacy version you will see that they all go through exactly the same in the PlayStation 4 version, even if we leave it on the computer. Now in the expanded and improved version, which I'm showing you, it already stops at the wall exactly like the Play 5 version. There's nothing additional because even the leaves have shadows as well. So you can see that there's a better interaction of the game elements with walls and etc. here in GTA 5. So I think interaction might be the ideal word for you to understand what I'm talking about, but it's exactly like the Play 5 version. It turned out really good. Moving on to the water part here, I was expecting a slightly better result here. This is the old legacy version, there's a new version now, and you can see that the difference is almost zero. It practically doesn't change at all. The same thing happens in the PS5 version as well. The difference is almost zero. Even in fidelity mode, you only have a little more, I don't know, water response. I wish the water had been improved a little bit, but I don't know. The guys also don't need to drag on too much in GTA 5. They should tell these guys to focus on GTA 6 because the audience can't take it anymore. In the legacy version of GTA 5, I also had the impression that this sand that comes out is darker if you, for example, throw sand backwards. In the expanded and enhanced computer version, I think it was a middle ground between the old version and the Play 5 version because the Play 5 one is very light, the legacy is very dark, and the expanded and enhanced one stayed in the middle ground. And finally, coming out of the graphics comparison, just to complement, in this latest version now, you also have the haptic feedback from PlayStation 5, meaning if you are playing with your PlayStation 5 controller on the computer, you will be able to feel some textures or some things like that, which was previously only available on the PS5. You don't have that even in the Xbox Series version, but that's a very cool detail. I at least played a lot on the PS5, I got used to it, and I like that they brought it now, the haptic feedback, to the computer. In addition, you no longer need to use any kind of emulator to be able to play with your DualSense directly on GTA 5 from the PS5, because before I played on Epic Games and I needed to use a plugin for it to recognize it. Guys, at first glance, this is the comparison we have for today, right? Everything in 4K running at maximum so you can draw your own conclusions, along with my opinions, of course. There may be other differences, but man, it's only been few hours since the game was released. I did my best here to try to bring it to you as quickly as possible. If I manage to later on, I'll do something much more detailed, much more wow, and then you guys will enjoy it even more. And just to make it clear, there is a huge difference between comparisons, for example, from PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4, which was a huge deal. Probably many people didn't even notice. If you want to understand better what I'm talking about, there were even changes in NPCs and so on that many people didn't even pay attention to. Click here next to the arrow to be redirected to that video. It shows the difference between the versions from Play 3 to PlayStation 4, which is simply absurd. That's it, guys. Success, cheers, thanks, and we're in this together.